Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well wherever you are. Much love to you all. We're back again for another episode of Fuck I Don't Know. My name is Sim.
And I'm Kevin.
Sim and Kevin, as always, your two beloveds. Today we're talking about a topic that's really near and dear to my heart. It's masculinity and kind of how that's changed in the world that we're living today. For me, it's been really nice seeing that the old ideas of masculinity are kind of being shed for a more open, more communicative, let's be honest, a more kind of feminine way of looking at masculinity, which I think is a really healthy thing, because it's been something that's been more on the toxic side of things and lends itself to a lot of the problems that we have in the world, you know. And the ability to talk about it and deal with it, I think is something that's really important for men. But have you kind of seen that?
Yeah, I've been doing the facilitating work with men, and I've been in a lot of men's groups over the years. And our society is primarily patriarchal. And we can look at it from the perspective that men really kind of screwed this up. I think ultimately we all agreed to it, that this was part of our process in learning. And men generally, we have that sense of mistrust. We want to thump our chest and we want to produce and be of value. And it's a system, or value system, that has some good qualities to it, and it also has some negative qualities to it. As like you said, leaning more towards the feminine. And, we all have both masculine and feminine, okay? The masculine side is the aggressive, is the do it, I'm going to get it done, let's solve the problem. And then the feminine side is more, and it's within each of us, where we literally sort of become more receptive, more open, more communicative, more receptive, and ultimately vulnerable, which for most of us, that's a toughie.
I'm never vulnerable. I'm impenetrable. I'm a man. Nobody can touch me. Don't come at me, bro. That's the vulnerability. I mean, that's even just saying the word makes you feel vulnerable. Yeah. You're like, it's something that, especially in the old view of masculinity, has been looked at as a weakness.
Sure, absolutely.
We were kind of taught that women would see you as weak if you are vulnerable.
Oh, sure.
Right? But it's like our parents are like, hey, don't cry. Don't look like you're hurt. And like, if you are hurt, bottle that shit up. You're a man. And there's all these kind of euphemisms that we use to signify the fact that like we're strong and we have to hold a certain image. And if we don't do that, then the world will see us as weak. Absolutely. Whereas the strength lies in actually owning the vulnerability piece, and you become a better man. You become that person that you really wanted to become the whole time. Yeah,
you really do, because you find more of a sense of balance. It's not one-sided. Yeah, and we're taught, from early on, this is cultural. You look at different cultures all over the world, and it's really not gender specific, but since we're just talking about masculinity today, it crosses both lines. Vulnerability. Very interestingly enough, one of the things I use in my therapy sessions when I talk about is there's a painting. It's a Danish painting, and it's called Homecoming. And it's this picture of a mother in a log cabin, her daughter and granddaughter being held, and they're meeting at a doorway. And I know when I greet people I love, I hug them, I hold them. Yeah. What they literally, the painting is them shaking hands. Like, is this a business deal? So it's cultural. Yeah. And I'm kind of doing this because I'm going to take a step back so that we look at it historically. That what we do, or at that time, if you really look at it in the world, there was famine, there was plague, there was all of these things that just wiped out half of the civilizations, So we as human beings, we don't want to get close. If we're going to lose somebody, we just as soon withdraw, keep our distance. Yep. And, so it's really genetically engineered, sort of in our DNA, if you really want to look at it in deep sense. But
like, are you saying like men, or just the human race?
Human race, yeah. But men in particular. we suffer from it even more because when you look at the masculine or the female, we're different in terms of genitalia, the way we were raised. When we talk about women and femininity within women, they have a tendency to be more communicative,
Yep.
more open, more vulnerable,
Yep.
be able to share what they're feeling and be able to emote. Where men, we've been generally, like you said, we were taught. I was taught when I was a kid growing up, you shut up, you swallow, you big boys don't cry or I'll smack you. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Wait a minute, this is kind of confusing. So, we all go through that. And there comes a point in our time, in our life, that doesn't work anymore. Like you said, and you're in a loving relationship, and if there isn't that level of communication, it doesn't really take you in deep.
Mm-hmm.
And you've learned this yourself. So yeah, vulnerability is key.
Yeah, and like it's in a weird way, when we're in our masculine and we're kept in that old idea of masculinity, you aren't able to become that man. Like that was my experience. I was in the corporate world and just doing the whole round and trying to be this manly man who's strong, who's
Sure.
achieving, who's doing all these things. And I always knew, I was like, I know I am this person inside who I love.
Yeah.
But there's some part of it that I wasn't able to manifest, and I wasn't in love with myself. Even though I got to the heights where I was achieving and succeeding, which I'd been working
Sure.
towards.
Yeah.
I just never achieved that until I got into a relationship where I was shown those parts of me which I was avoiding. And as soon as those parts were highlighted,
Yeah.
I instantly fell in love with myself. And even that idea of like falling in love with myself, I mean, you look in the mirror to fall in love with that guy, that's a dude. So like for me to love a dude, I'm a dude. I don't love dudes, So like I only love chicks, bro. But that's a bit of a joke, but it's kind of true. Like to love yourself, you really have to go within yourself and accept all of the pieces. And as men, we never even look at the fact that we have a feminine side inside.
Sure, we weren't taught, wasn't nurtured.
Yeah.
Wasn't communicated to us. Like you said earlier, our value is based upon what we do, what we did, what we do, and what we've accomplished.
Yep.
If I have the car, the money, all of the things that that we value, then you're a man.
Yep.
But it isn't until you get older, usually, and you're really fortunate because you're younger to come to that understanding and to have a woman who can guide you into that, because that's really
So
key.
lucky.
It's really, really key.
Yep.
There are men's groups, we can learn from them, and we can develop, and we can. But one of the things I learned, even doing men's groups, there was still something missing.
Yeah.
And it was really that aspect or that piece, like you said. Once we're in a loving relationship and that woman knows how to hold that space, it's amazing what can happen.
Yeah, 100%.
And she's not there to bust your chops. She's there to hold you and, okay, what do you need? How can we transverse this together?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's powerful. Vulnerability.
And it really helps you understand each other. Like for me, it was also the fact that I understood the dynamic of masculinity and femininity. That, if she doesn't feel safe in my masculine, then she goes into her masculine.
Sure.
And then we got two dudes dating each other again. So apparently that's not how it's supposed to be.
Energetically,
yeah, exactly. But it does. It really lends itself to understanding that, like, if I have a healthy, safe masculine, I'm in my masculine in a safe way, and I'm in touch with my feminine side, and you're able to kind of feel into things, but also be able to be that support and pillar in the relationship, that automatically has the effect on her, and vice versa.
Sure.
Like women have been made to be too in their masculine. They're taught, like, we're all told we're all the same. We're all the same. Everybody's equal. Like, yeah, life itself is equal. There's no one life that matters more than another.
On some levels we're equal, but yeah, go ahead.
But that's what I mean. Like, so like I can definitely lift more than her.
Yeah.
She can definitely understand emotions way deeper than I can.
Sure.
So we're all skilled in our own ways, and it kind of does a bit of a disservice to say we're all just the same, and yet at the same time men should be men and women should be women. I think it's way better to actually be in touch with both sides, and sometimes you're in one role, sometimes you're in another role, and you can be happy in both.
Absolutely, yeah. Again, it's finding the balance. And like you're saying, that once you have, masculine and feminine, we both have it, But once you find that balance or the flow, it's what I call the ebb and the flow. Otherwise, it's a dynamic tension. You're always pushing and pulling and fighting and, stepping into one or the other, the masculine or the feminine. But there comes a time when it begins to flow between the two of you. And like you said, the woman can step into that more assertive role, which we call masculine, and you can take a step back and just kind of relax. Actually, it's kind of nice.
It is.
When you really learn to flow with it. It's a beautiful thing. And then what happens in a relationship is that sometimes she's ahead of you, sometimes you're ahead of her, sometimes you're both together. And it's just, again, following that ebb and flow.
Yeah, for sure. And I also think it's also tied to the concept of masculinity is tied to most of the problems, or a lot of the problems that we have in society. Because a lot of cultures, especially coming from India, there is this idea of like a hierarchy. The men are kind of above the women. Mm-hmm. And it's always been funny to me a little bit, even as a child. I used to think, wait, but she made you. She birthed you, but you're like, no. She is below me. And it's like, really understanding that I'm a woman as well. I'm a man and a woman at the same time, and kind of leaning into that rather than leaning away from it can lead to the equality without saying everybody is the same.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, historically, it's been very patriarchal.
Yeah.
That's okay.
I never noticed.
It was part of the program.
Yeah, of course.
Part of our learning. Part of our ultimately, it's part of our simply remembering. Okay.
What do we need to remember about that, Kevin?
What do we need to remember?
Yeah, what would you remind men, or at least just in general, about masculinity? What are some pieces that you feel like really help people make a change in their life?
It's really first becoming aware. If you're more masculine and more aggressive, is to first become aware of it. And are you happy, or are you living a life where it's more that you're trying to control things, as opposed to flowing with things? And don't get me wrong, because the masculine is an important aspect of us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Love it.
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes to masculinity, becoming aware of it, and then once we become aware of it, is it really functional? Is it functioning well?
Yep.
Am I living in the world in a fuller, more broader way?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, would be another thing that I would take a look at. And the word vulnerability is it's a tough pill to take, like you said earlier.
Yeah.
But remembering that whenever you're in a situation and that masculine drive, something's missing, is to really begin to open to that. Okay, that element of what you may not even be able to put words to.
So that's where it gets complicated. Like, how? Like, how do I understand my masculinity is not serving me as well as it should. What are some things I could do to open up to that vulnerability? Of course, having a relationship, you that lends itself to that. But many times that may not be. Everybody may not be that lucky.
Yeah. Yeah, if you have a loving relationship like that, and like you have, it's really powerful, because relationships, no matter what level it is, relationships are designed, I believe, for two purposes. One is to foster and to care and nurture and to love. Okay, that's the ultimate.
Yep.
And the other is to be a mirror.
Yep.
Here you go. You're on the fast track now. I'm going to trigger you, push all your buttons and all of that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And so, the relationship can really do that and accelerate it.
What else? What if I'm just a single guy. I want to become more vulnerable. I feel like men's circles.
Yeah,
like
that's another one. Men's circles is really, really powerful.
Yep.
So I mentioned earlier, because a lot of times we don't know how to communicate with men.
Yeah.
From a place of vulnerability, because what happens is, oftentimes and I'm just going to speak of heterosexual, because oftentimes what happens is when we become intimate, intimacy means conversation, closeness, doesn't necessarily mean gender, sexuality. But oftentimes in the beginning, if someone is very, very masculine, that's very sort of frightening.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh my God, am I becoming gay? And that's a whole nother conversation because that's also appropriate.
Yeah, of course.
You know, so.
But just the concept that that's tied together is like,
sure.
Hey, if I'm intimate with another guy, I'm gay.
Because we tie intimacy from a heterosexual standpoint to women. Okay, we don't open that doorway to that gender. So, you know, so that's.
And honestly, some of the best people best guys that I've met, they've been gay. And I was like, wow, I really love how you're just you.
Yeah.
You know, you're not having to filter things through some lens of like, I have to be this type of a man or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
And over time, I've realized that it doesn't matter who you are, as long as you're being the real you.
Sure.
And if that includes you having to kind of be an open book and not be part of what society normally wants you to be that, right? And that's where I feel like men's circles are this new, to me at least, it's been a newer phenomenon that is really opening up the way that we communicate, because it creates the space where you are, where everybody's being vulnerable. Because I think, especially for me, you know, the society, the way society presented masculinity was like, well, you do it because other men are doing it. And when we're all kind of walking around with our chest popped out, and you're like, well, nobody else seems to be talking about their feelings, so I'm not going to talk about my feelings.
Sure.
But as soon as you have a circle, you're like, wait. So one of the really eye-opening men's circles I went to, I sat down and it was like a bunch of guys I see at the gym, and I was like, cool. You guys talk about your feelings? This is awesome. And we all have muscles and stuff, right?
Sure.
But the conversations we had, and the kind of the depth that you see in the people, and you almost see this deep breath that they take, like, oh, there's a place where I don't have to act a certain way. And then what that did to our relationships. And I would see them again, and it was just like, hey, like, how are you? You know, what's going on with you? Really, really speaking from a place of like trust.
Yeah,
that's huge.
That's the key, trust.
Yeah.
You know, because most of us don't. We've been taught that to be successful, you had to sort of, you know, not trust that person.
Of course.
Or you wanted to step over them, or to, you know, to do what you needed to do to get where you wanted to go.
Yeah.
So trusting is key.
Do you also feel like that comes from, because I mean, up until a few hundred years ago, we were all going to war, and vulnerability was this thing which could leave you open for something.
We're still doing it.
yeah, that's true. That's true. But do you think it comes from that? Like we've had to keep up a certain persona to make sure that nobody could attack us and take our families or something like that? Like
you know, it's even beyond that. It's primal. You know, whether you're a caveman, you know, it started way back.
Yeah.
And we've just continued that on a much more volatile level, you know, in terms of war and all of that kind of stuff. But I think it's really more in our DNA. You know, as part of, you know, as long as the most history that I've ever known, and as far back as I can remember, and what I've read is, cavemen, or even beyond that. You know, the guy was with the club, the woman was in the cave.
Yeah.
So
that's how.
So we're all coming out of the cave, and
I'm still a caveman, so I haven't really. You should ask my girlfriend. I'm about as caveman as it gets. I look like a caveman. It's nice. For me, it was also like psychedelics. That was a big thing that really helped me understand, like, hey, this image of yourself that you keep in your head, it's only in your head.
Sure.
It's not out there in the world.
Yeah.
All this, you kind of make up a story about yourself. When you really come down to the basics of it, you're the same as this plant, you're the same as any other person. We're all just experiencing this life from a very basal perspective, and having this kind of facade that we keep up, it doesn't really, nobody cares other than you.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah. I want to share a couple of things. One is a sort of a cautionary note when we talk about hallucinogenics, plant medicine, and those other things. I've been doing this a long time, but I've been on this journey for a long time, and I won't go into my history about some of the things I've done in my life. But what I've come to understand is, if you are truly called and you feel it in your heart that it's part of your journey, then seek it out.
Yep.
Seek it out first from a place and a person that's trusting, that you know.
Yep.
Okay. But I also share with people, and people have come to me many, many times asking me, should I do this or should I do that? Or there's plant medicine, all these other things.
Yep.
And we won't go into the names of them. And I tell them a couple of things. Okay. First question is, why do you want to do it?
Yep.
Well, I'm doing it because I'm curious. Everybody else is doing it. I would generally suggest not to. Okay.
Yep. Yep.
If you're just looking for curiosity. And what you said is really important. If I'm called to do it, or if you're called to do it, and it really feels right, put those things in place, the right person, the facilitator and so forth, and then allow it to happen. I also know through my own experience that you don't have to use those types of hallucinogens or medicines and plant medicines and so forth, because it can happen naturally. And the key to that is really preparing yourself for that. And
that's almost a more effective means of doing it.
Well, it is.
It's a more long-lasting kind of thing because you've done the work.
You bet.
You're actually, it's a longer road, but it's the one that
Yes and no. It can be a longer road. I don't think it is going to be any longer for most of us. It used to be that it was a longer road. I know I've been on this journey for 30 plus years.
Long road.
Long road.
Yeah.
And now with a lot of the people that I work with, it's happening instantaneously.
I love that.
Things that took me years to integrate and to understand, it's happening much more quickly.
You definitely, to that point, you definitely do need the right guidance.
Sure, absolutely.
Obviously, if you're doing it, you obviously need the right guidance. But even if you're not, you need to make sure you have the right teachers, you have the right people.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I get a little concerned when everybody's a life coach.
Sure. Yeah, they took a weekend certificate and they got a weekend certificate and they get life.
Yes, life
really?
coach, yeah. And it's like, man, if in that case, I'm a life coach. I've lived life too. I can coach you on how to do it, right?
Yeah, exactly. But when you're talking about plant medicines and those kinds of things as well, I have seen it, as you said, really open people quickly. Mm-hmm. Okay? Yeah. And that's their journey. The caveat is, if you come to a place where I need to do it 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 times, something else is going on.
Yeah.
Because that's generally the ego that gets attached to another form of stimulation. Yeah. Oh, I saw this, and I saw colors, and I saw lights, and I did. And my first question would be someone that wants to take a journey, and if they've taken a journey, what did you learn?
Exactly.
What was there for you?
Yeah.
Wasn't just, I had another psychedelic event. I mean, they did that in the 60s.
Yeah.
I was at the end of it, so I know that stuff really well.
Yeah, exactly.
And
for a lot of people, it didn't change much. You just go kind of right back to it, like, oh, that was cool. Back to my old shit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that you brought up a really good point. One of the biggest things that we hold on to as men is the ego.
Sure.
It's almost like a lot of us even just think our ego is us.
Well, it is part of us.
It's part of us, but we almost wear it like it's like that is all I am. Like as a man, especially that bravado and the
persona of sort of perfection.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And we like cherish it, and especially in the business world, it's something that's really made like, well, that guy, he's successful, so he gets to have this ego. And many of the times when I've actually really got to know those people and really spoken to them, you just see the pain of like they're still searching for something, achieved all the successes, so-called, but the ego is there kind of ruining the experience of life. And that's why people have midlife crisis.
Sure, because they've never really expressed themselves and really gotten in touch with themselves.
Yeah, for sure.
Like you're saying, they've chased the carrot, and once they've gotten it, they think, wow, this is it. Yeah. And it's interesting because I've worked with a lot of people, and I've had many of these conversations with people. And I learned very early on in the corporate world, I'd seen people around me who were very much the vibrato, both men and women.
Yep.
They thought they're on the top of the world, I'm invincible and all of this. And when I got to really know them, I could see their pain. Yeah. I knew what was going on. Yeah. And I found that most of the time, what drives us are parts of us that are hurting. Mm-hmm. We're seeking something outside of ourselves, and when we do that, we're looking for this sense of control, perfection.
Something.
And like you said, we put on this persona of perfection, like I've got it all together. It's like, do you really?
Yeah, exactly. You can try all you want, but I can kind of see through the cracks.
Sure.
So that brings up a really kind of good topic that I wanted to touch as well, is to that effect of our pain driving us.
Sure.
I've really, it was a little mind-blowing for me to understand that it's the pain of my inner child.
You bet. Yeah. You know, a lot of people, John Bradshaw was the author and who sort of developed this from Texas a number of years back. And he said it's the inner child.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of that work with people. I don't care how old you are. And what happens oftentimes, and psychology has literally proven this, that from the ages of 6 to 10, 7 to 10, somewhere in that area, is where we received the trauma.
Yep.
Okay, we experienced it. Okay, and that's really where it came from. And the inner child, as you mentioned earlier, doesn't have the ability to sort of filter through it and see, oh my God, this is really their stuff, not mine.
Right.
You don't see that when you're a kid.
Right, of course, yeah.
You see those people that are important to you, your mother, your father, your grandparents, siblings, and you look at them as God. Or, you know, they know it all. And I'm going to emulate them, I'm going to listen to them, I'm going to love them, and interpret that as love.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah.
Well, that gets deep.
Oh yeah.
That gets deep when you your traumas as a child get tied to your concepts of love and how you receive love.
Absolutely.
And then you take it on as an adult and think, oh, well, I'm an adult. All that stuff is bygone. You know, and carry it around. Like, for me, it was mind blowing to meet my inner child at 31. For the first time ever, I went back and I was like, oh, there's a kid in there.
Sure.
Like an actual child who I met and I hugged and I picked him up and I put him on my hip and I was like, it's okay.
Yeah. It's about reintegrating.
It's okay.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And then I realized he's been making a lot of choices the whole time. Like,
he's the one where you're kicking the ground, you're getting angry, you're getting you know, all these emotions. That's where it comes from.
Yeah. And a lot of the toxic parts of masculinity that we're talking about are tied to that idea of like that, number one, I'm not a child, I'm a man.
Sure.
Right? But not accepting that child. Yeah. And so that's what I wanted to ask you. You know, you've gone through life a decent bit. So how do you integrate, because you want to keep a lot of the good parts of that child.
Absolutely.
Being a child comes with this beauty of life.
Never want to let it go.
So how do you create that balance?
Well, first I'm going to share that one of my teachers many years ago told me, he said that most of us, he's done a lot of this facilitating work for 40, 50 years. And he said, Kevin, most people, I don't care who you talk to, function emotionally, if they're lucky, of an 11-year-old. Okay, if you're lucky emotionally. Doesn't mean you don't have the persona, you can't, that you navigate the world really well, but when it comes to confrontation and it comes to emotions, we're kids. We're children.
Okay.
Really. And as you mentioned, that's where I like to start working with people a lot of times, is that inner child work. And I do that through an emotional profile where you kind of look at what happened historically. Okay. And almost without exception, several of my teachers said, you know, who've been doing this for 40, 50 years, they counted on 2 fingers the thousands of people they worked with. They said they didn't need any help. So I mean, think about it. We're all dysfunctional from a dysfunctional place. We learned it.
Yeah, of course.
Cool.
Yeah.
So
hilarious. But I don't need any help. I'm a fully healed man. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm all good. I never want to do any inner work. It's one of the funniest kind of meetings that I had was sat down with a guy. He was old enough that I would expect he should have some wisdom.
Sure.
And we started talking about healing, and there were 3 healers sitting with us, and he's like, "What is this healing? What am I healing from?" And I was like, "Trauma." And he's like, "What? Like, why? Why do I have to heal my trauma?" And I'm like, "Because you hurt people. You hurt the ones we love." And he's like, "It's all BS." And I was like, that's what it sounds like when you are coming from a place of pain, but you're really not willing to accept it.
Yeah, it's a place of denial.
Yeah, complete denial.
It's not a river in Egypt.
No. Exactly.
Yeah.
From denial.
Yeah. It's a survival mechanism. We have many. Withdrawal, there's many things we use.
So we've talked about vulnerability. We've talked about having a space to open up. Do you feel like there are other therapies that are really beneficial to somebody who wants to go on that journey of discovery?
Sure. Yeah, there's lots. When you talk about healing, you have to be careful.
It's charged word.
Yeah, it really is, because a lot of people equate it to New Age, it's all this stuff.
Woo-woo,
And I'm a therapist.
Yeah.
I'm also Native American. I do ceremonies. I do many number of things.
Yeah.
I'm all of them and none of them, by the way. Okay.
Right.
They're things that I've learned through experience that I find that are effective. Okay, and I use them. So where are we again? I'm just kind of.
Like, what are some things that
okay.
that would really help somebody open up and to their masculinity, femininity?
Like you said, first of all, find a confidant, somebody that's usually generally older that you can have some kind of communication with, some sort of sense of rapport where you're not trying to prove yourself.
Yep.
It might be a grandfather, it might be a friend that you know.
Yeah.
That just meet him for, a coffee or something, and just, hey, I'm kind of feeling something.
Right.
And that's
so
one way.
So we're having a coffee after this, apparently?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Coffee, find a men's group.
Yeah.
Was really, really powerful. And one of the things I've learned and I've seen happen so often is when you begin this process, it'll keep coming. You'll feel it. You'll have a sense. You'll have an intuition that sort of guides you in that direction. So the key is to start.
Yeah, like you said, to even just realize it and see that it's a thing that needs to be done.
Absolutely.
And I feel like that is another big piece that the traditional masculinity really pulls you away from is the intuition. Because in my experience, women tend to be a lot more intuitive. Men, we tend to be a lot more like logical, and we really lean into it. Or at least the traditional ideas of it is like, no, I want to control everything.
Sure.
I don't want to go according to intuition. I want to go according to a plan and strategy and everything.
Yeah, I see that a little different.
Yeah.
That men have intuition.
Of course.
They've simply used it for business or for material goods.
Okay. Yeah.
As opposed emotional.
Right.
Okay, so very different.
Yeah.
They're both present. It's present in the men as well, but it was used differently.
Yeah.
Where now you're kind of fine-tuning a little bit. You're tweaking it where you're opening to more of that vulnerability opening.
Yeah, and even like just the idea of emotions.
Sure. Oh my God.
I'm a man. I don't have emotions.
Most guys, when they first touch an emotion, it's just like they just want to up and run.
Yeah, it's like, crazy.
Are you freaking crazy? I'm out of here.
You ever hear this one? I'm a man. I don't cry.
Oh yeah.
I'm a man. I don't cry.
Yeah.
Well, even when I was a baby, they slapped me on my butt, and I just went, I'm a man. I've heard that too often. But okay. Thank you guys for sitting and joining us through this little journey. We're going to be doing this more often, discussing awesome topics. Anything you would like to say to close this thing off?
To close it off, I would just say, just begin to explore things that you might be afraid of.
Beautiful words to end on.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. Love you guys. See you next time.
We'll see you later.